Okay, welcome to day 4 of our psychology training. In this video, we'll study introduction of neuropsychology. Okay, so till now we have studied theories of psychology, what psychology is. We have studied developmental psychology, how brain, there are involvement of brain we have studied in first two lectures. And the third one is social psychology. We have studied that how a person act in social settings. Now we'll understand what are the neurological basis to our behavior. Okay, how brain influence our behavior we are going to study in neuropsychology. Okay, so brain is, as brain develop, a person is developing. Okay, if brain stop developing, the person is not developing, the behavior is not developing anymore. Why? Because brain and behavior have a relation which is now well established, which is now well experimented, well established, well studied, well invasive. Everything is done for new. Not everything is done, there are a lot of things left in neuropsychology yet, but still a lot of things, like we have dissected the brain and we have understood which are the sections and which sections do what, which functions are regulated by which part of the brain. So neuropsychology is exploring brain influence on behavior. Okay, so how a part of brain which is functioning 24 hours is influence a behavior and is responsible for a particular kind of behavior. Okay, so a brain is an active architect who is developing human behavior day by day. Okay, though the good and the nourished brain is the nourished person's behavior is. If there is some degenerative and some kind of flaws in brain function, then there will be flaws in behavior function. Okay, so now let's study first let's study the historical perspective. Why? Because in neuropsychology is not new. Neuropsychology is being studied because there are people, physicians, who believe that everything is because of brain function, everything is because of bodily function, and biology is there for everything. Okay, so biological perspective always said that there is a biological attached to everything. So that is why we have to see. Hippocrates always believed that there is something functional in the brain, which is because of this sculpture, the brain we have, the skull we have, inside it there is a brain which is controlling every behavior. This is what Hippocrates used to believe. Then there is a marking, like milestone for neuropsychology come with a accident of Phineas Gage. Okay, there's a case of Phineas Gage. He was a rail worker. While working on daily basis, there was an incident. He met an accident where a rod surpasses his like a rod get stuck in his brain. Okay, which is rupture her skull and pass through a brain. Okay, so what happened is that what that rod did is that the rod passed through his brain and ruptured some part of brain. Okay, but what happened is if that person get recovered and that person was living, okay, he wasn't died. So now people understood. Now when the person, after getting settled with their medical surgeries and pharmacological treatment, after that, after recovering completely healthy biologically, the personality of that person took a 360 turn. Okay, the person used to behave in such manner, now he is behaving in another manner. So this is how a person, this is the milestone, this is the keystone which said that brain is responsible for human behavior, because it changes the personality of persons 350 degree. Now there are pioneers like Broca and Van Nix, Carl Van Nix and Broca. They have studied, dissected brain and understood that there is a Broca's area and then Wernicke's area. They named them on themselves that these areas, they find out, dissected the brain and find out some areas which are responsible for language comprehensions. Okay, so these are the earlier milestone which brings neuropsychology in existence. Okay, so there are key principles, there are key concepts of neuropsychology which we should understand. First is neuroplasticity or brain plasticity. Okay, so what it is, there is a sculpture within. Okay, when you think in a manner, there is a chain of neurotransmitter which get activated. There is a path of neurotransmitter which get activated, and the beautiful thing is you can, by just thinking in another way, you can change that path. Okay, so like you are perceiving something as good, So now your neurological pathway is working on a good pathway. Okay, there's a to B point which say this perception is good. Okay, and there is a C to D point which say this perception is bad. If you are having a C to D perspective, you can move and shift to A to B, and similarly if a person having A to B perspective, he can shift to C to D. So it say that our brain have a roadway. Okay, so there is a path which is created when you are thinking, which can easily changeable, which can be changed by just thinking in a certain manner. So this is understand, like there is neuroplasticity in brain. Okay, so there are neurotransmitters and there are neurotransmitter and there are neurons which get activated while thinking. So this is how, and which is what in nature, which is plasticity, which have a flexibility in nature, which is have plasticity in nature. So this is how we can shift our attention to something different, and we can just change the pathway in neurological. So the second is neural network is there, the interconnected web of neurons. Okay, so these neurons are connected to each other, dendrite and axon are connected to each other, and they pass on the information through it using neurotransmitters. So this is how brain is constituted. So if you are sensing anything, so it is with rapid speed, with electrochemical speed, it is going to be transferred in brain and it is going to travel in brain. So this is why this help us to survive in difficult situation. If you are like sleeping and you get attacked by someone, or if you get attacked by any animal, or if you get into any disaster, so now the sensation is the sensation power, the motor skills and our neurotransmitter get activated, and neural network help us to understand that there is harm, there is pain, there is something, and we get attention. Okay, so third is cognitive domains. Cognitive domains is like in brain there are specialized department, there are specialized sections handling different kind of cognitive activity. You know, we have understood what are cognitive activities, memory, encoding and everything, like decision making and everything is cognitive activity. So every cognitive activity is controlled by a section and a part of brain. So this is how brain works. Okay, so brain have a particular section for something. If you are perceiving something, so you have a particular section where you can perceive something, while also you can decide something in your brain. So you are doing like multi-processing, everything, like if you are doing multi-work and things, so it will happen because of why? Because there are cognitive domains. So the cognitive activity can be we can do different cognitivity at the same time. Also, the another thing is, if some part get ruptured, the only few activities are going to get stopped. Not completely cognitive function is going to lose. There will be some cognitive function which are going to be lost if there is a brain injury or there is a brain stroke. Okay, so now there's neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are chemical messenger. In this video we'll study how many types, like we will try to study some major neurotransmitter and what they do in our brain. So neurotransmitter are when the two neurons are connected, the information is passed from one neuron to another neurons is through neurotransmitter. Okay, third is lateralization. The brain has two hemisphere. Okay, a right hemisphere and left hemisphere. Okay, so right hemisphere on the other hand, if we see right hemisphere, it is responsible for some creativity or something, and left hemisphere is responsible for logical thinking or something. So the thing is ki now you have separate partitions. Okay, so now if you are acting on something and now you have to think creatively, and if you are solving some maths puzzles also, so you can, if you have like incubated some problem in your brain. Okay, so it is working. If there's a problem related to right hemisphere, you have incubated that problem in your brain and you are working on something which is like done by your left brain. Okay, so now your problem is incubated at the same time. There's something like you are working on another thing, and that's how you can do both the things at the same time, and you can get a eureka moment while doing something else if you are working on completely different thing. Okay, and there's a problem associated with a completely different angle. So you are working on something, but at the same time your other hemisphere will handle that other problem which is completely different and provide you a eureka moment where you can find solution by just incubating that problem. So these are the particular key concepts of brain. Now let's understand the neuroanatomy of brain. Okay, cerebral cortex is there. First is frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is in the front of our brain. Frontal lobe, in this picture you can see that there the pink part is frontal lobe. Okay, so frontal lobe is responsible for planning, decision making, okay, everything like understanding something, or there's the thought of your, like, the thought thinkings you are having is because of frontal lobe. Evolutionary psychology that it is the last part of brain which get developed. Okay, so that is why this is which is different between human and monkeys. Okay, so if we see our ancestor, so the frontal lobe is absent. So that is why they don't have much thoughts, they don't have much decision making, they don't have much accuracy in decision making as a person in with the frontal lobe have, because we are human, we have frontal lobe, we have an advantage. Okay, so frontal lobe is the executive suite of your human behavior. Okay, now parietal lobe. Parietal lobe is the green part in this video, in this picture is your parietal lobe. Parietal lobe have sensory information. Okay, so it is the sensory integration hub, where you can get sensations, where you can get what is how you are feeling, how hot you are, how cold you are feeling. It is kind of a GPS system which is inbuilt in your body, which help you to feel the temperature, which help you to feel the comfort and everything. So parietal lobe is responsible. So a lot of time if people are having difficulty sleeping or something, so there is issue concerned with parietal lobe, because they can't sense good. Okay, so there are sensory impairments are there, where they can't feel pain, when they can't they feel a lot of pain or something. So it is abnormality of parietal lobe. So now we have understanding the lobes, so also understand if there's abnormality, so whatever function the brain section is responsible for, it is going to get affected. Now temporal lobe. Temporal lobe, the purple part in this picture is temporal lobe. It is for our language archive. Okay, so your language comprehension, the way language develops, the kind of language you are going to develop. Okay, so everything related to it is an archive. It contains archive files of your language. Okay, so this is what temporal lobe do is. Also, if you have developed a particular kind of language, you are going to understand everything in your language, and you are going to store that thing in your language. That is why temporal lobe is also responsible for your memory. It also handles your memory information. If you lost what kind of language, what language you have you used to speak, if you don't know what is language comprehension, if you just if there's any issue in your temporal lobe, if you don't understand any language, then you cannot memorize anything, because you are what you are doing in your brain, there's nothing comprehension is happening. Okay, there is no language you are understanding, there's nothing which your brain can understand. Still you will experience feelings and sensory information, but yeah, you can't memorize stuff, stories or things. You can just stay or you can just feel it, but you can't explore and comprehend what story is. Okay, so this is what temporal lobe do is, and if there is a abnormality of temporal lobe, then there is abnormality of language functions and memory processes. Okay, so now we have understood that there are lobes responsible for human behavior. So it provides us a biological perspective to behavior, it provides us neurological perspective to behavior. So if there is any case or any person who come to us and we see that there is behavior problem, so there might be possibility that only not therapies and counseling is gonna help. There should be need of psychopharmacological treatment for the particular person. So this is how we can understand that it is just brain, this is just how brain function. You have similar brain as I have. Okay, we have same kind of brain. Okay, the structure of brain is same. You have temporal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, frontal lobe. Every lobes are same. The hemisphere are same. There are possibility, there are exceptions where a person can develop a particular kind of brain where there's a temporal lobe is absent or some kind of abnormality could be there. But understand it. So this is how a psychology become unbiased. Okay, if you understand there is a similar kind of functions which are happening. Okay, there are similar kind of systematic arrangement is there. Okay, so in a bad day I can met a accident where I can rupture any of my lobe, or where I can rupture any kind of like brain abnormality could be there, which can make me a person who is not able to understand things, who is not able to memorize things. So this is how we distinct ourselves from society, and we become a onlooker to problems, and we understand a different perspectives to person's problem, because we know that there are reasons, there are n number of reasons. And now with this neurological advancements, we can understand that there's a systematic, there's a set, and there's a unique, and there's a completely perfect example of how human behavior works. Okay, now we can distance ourselves from someone, and we can be unbiased with every person. Okay, now occipital lobe is the camera of your brain. Okay, the visual information you are getting is getting stored in your occipital lobe. Okay, so if there is no relation between your occipital lobes and if there's some damage in your occipital lobe, so now you have completely working eyes, but still you can't like your eyes are working well, but you can't get the visuals, you can't understand, you can't comprehend the visuals. Similarly, like temporal lobe do for languages, occipital lobe do for visuals. Okay, so the artist and if we talking about artists, the painting they do, the visual perception they have, and the way their motor function do, and the way he can create a replica of anything, it is because of the good occipital lobe connection with motor nerves. Okay, getting it. Now like continue with neuroanatomy. There's limbic system. Okay, so there's a dissection of a brain diagram where we can see amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus. Okay, so there are n number of other organs in our limbic system. First part is amygdala. Okay, so the emotional manager of your brain is amygdala. Okay, how it manages emotion? Every emotion like anger, fear is settled in this is controlled by and regulated by this limbic system part. Okay, the amygdala. So there are experiment where they remove amygdala from a rat, and now that rat start showing no fear responses. Okay, there was no fear. Okay, so there was an experiment where they first they were trying to understand which organ, amygdala or hippocampus, is responsible for our fear reactions. So when they remove hippocampus, so there was the person didn't know it wasn't done on a person, it was done on a rat. So the rat like wasn't getting like the the experiment result was like the hippocampus, if there was no hippocampus, the rat or the object they were working on was unable to recall its what is frightening it. Okay, but when there is absence of amygdala, anything you can do anything, but there is no fear response. So amygdala is how responsible for your emotional settlement. So if there is ruptured amygdala, that person can be very numb with emotions, that person cannot feel emotions, and at the same time, if the hippocampus is ruptured and if there is abnormality with hippocampus, that person will not be able to memorize or will not be able to recall stuff. Why? Because memory is a cognitive process which has encoding, storage and everything, and a recalling. So if there is like hippocampus is ruptured, the person cannot switch from long-term memory to short-term memory to long-term memory. In day-to-day life, we shift from long-term memory to working memory for our recalling and stuff. Then there is hypothalamus. Like we said, like in our parietal lobe is responsible for sensation and things. Hypothalamus is also responsible for the gauge of our hemostasis regulator. Hemostasis is maintaining balance in our body. Okay, if we are feeling chill, our body starts shivering. Why the body is shivering? The body is shivering to get some warmth. Okay, the friction can bring some warmth. If we are feeling warmth, if we are feeling like if there's summers and if there's hot weather, so our body will start like sweating. Why body will start sweating? Because it will cool down the temperature. So this is what is regulated by hypothalamus. Now there's brain stem, which is connect brain to our spinal cord. Okay, so it is brain's lifeline. Okay, so now if we see in if we see cases of cerebral palsy, so there is the umbilical cord wrap around the brain stem, which while in the delivery of that baby, uh, it ruptured the connection between the brain and the spinal cord. Because of that, that person spinal cord is responsible for our movements, our postures and everything. So when it gets ruptured, the person cannot stand, the person cannot walk or talk or anything. Okay, so there is a neurodevelopment disorder which created if there is a breakage of brain stem, or if there is any abnormality with brain stem. Paralysis and stuff is also attached with brainstem. Cerebellum is the motor coordinator. If the posture, how to pose and how to do this, and the fine motor skills are responsible is carried out by cerebellum. So cerebellum, if there is also similarly, if there is any abnormality with cerebellum, the person will not be able to do fine motor skills. He will will not be able to hold something for long, or some this kind of motor dysfunction can be happen with the person. How we understand that this person is having any kind of neurological disorder is or having any kind of neuropsychological abnormality? First is clinical interview based on ICD and DSM. We carried out some clinical interviews where we do some cognitive testing, where we do some perception testing, where we just try to understand all the functions I have told you about in frontal lobe, all the lobes or the organs are responsible. If there's a complaint, okay, related to I have issue with sleeping, I have issue with memorizing, so the other functions regulated by that organ are going to checked in clinical interviews, where we get information about the person, what the chief complaints are, what the problem he is having, why he is having, is there any kind of trauma, or is there kind of any stroke or anything in past, is there any injury or something. Then we proceed to cognitive testing. Cognitive testing is testing the cognition of that person. Memorizing, MMSE and MSc are there. MMSE is like mini mental health examinations, mental health status examination, where we can understand what are the cognitive ability of that person, how he can remember things, if there's long term memory loss or is there short term memory loss. So we just try to arithmetic skills on every kind of skill that person have. It is in cognitive testing, we see that if that person can recognize similarity between two things, if we can also recognize the difference between two things. So this is what happen is cognitive test. Now neuroimaging, there is a great way, okay, which all these physicians go for, which is MRI, fMRI and PET. MRI is a high definition image of your brain. Okay, if there is any rupture, like we do X-rays, similarly there is MRI which provide you a great and good high resolution image of your brain. Okay, dissections of your brain. Now fMRI is somewhere we can see actually in live how brain functions. Okay, so fMRI provides us, functional MRI provides us the function, how the brain is functioning. Okay, now PET is we are also used when you have to study particular kind of behavior in a person. Okay, so while doing while performing this particular behavior, what part of brain get activated, what neurotransmitter signals are getting connected, and how what are the signals and what are the wavelength of that signals, everything is confirmed in PET. Now then after that, behavioral observations are there. If you see someone who is lacking sleep, or if having some issue recalling stuff or something, but yeah, other function are well in that person, the person is good when we talk to him, language comprehension is done, but there are some cognitive difficulty that person is having. So we know that there are cognitive domains which can get ruptured or which can get function abnormally, and there are psychopharmacological treatment which can provide it to that person, help that person. So behavioral observations are also there for neurological assessment of a person with any difficulties or anything. Now cognitive domains. Now understand what are the cognitive domains are. We have talked about cognitive domains in earlier. Now cognitive domains are, first let's study memory. Memory is encoding of something, your sensation. If you sense something, so that sensation you feel in your brain, okay, you understand that sensation is your encoding of that information. Okay, while encoding, if you do like if you just encode some information and if you are not practicing it, it is going to be in your unconscious brain. But if you practice it, and if this information is very useful for your day-to-day activity, and this information like some systematic data facts collection or say which you have to present in your presentation of stuff, like I am talking about a lot of stuff which I have studied earlier, and now I am talking in front of camera. This is because of what I have encoded that information, and it is in my storage, which can be in long-term memory, which can be stored for life in long-term memory, and which can be retrieved by me. By if you can't recall something, so there are a lot of things which are responsible for recalling. There are visual cues, there are feel sensational cues which are there. If you get that kind of cues, so you get memory of something. Okay, so there's a cafe you visited with your loved ones. Okay, and there's aroma of that cafe. So what happens is if you visit that cafe another day or after some years, you don't have like a fresh memory of everything, but if you get that aroma again, you will see, like you will feel that, you will memorize, and you will remember that moment you shared with your family. So this is how memory cognitive domains works. Attention is there, you focus on something, and you can only focus on something if your parietal lobe is allowing you, and if your occipital lobe is allowing you. If your lobes are not functioning well, if there's some kind of abnormalities of some kind of strength or some kind of engagement of brain already there in something. Okay, so now understand, if your any lobe is involved or is attached or is getting is attentive to something, you can't shift your attention to another thing at the same time. To shift the attention, you have to shift the complete attention, and the complete functioning of brain will change. Okay, so this is how our attention gets stuck. Also, behavior also shape the neurological pathway. Okay, so that is why if you are excited, if you get dopamine from, like neurotransmitters are also there, na? So if you get dopamine from some work, if you have some kind of particular behavior or something, so it also get affect your concentration and will. Okay, now executive functions like planning, problem solving, decision making, everything is controlled by your frontal lobe, and your all the lobes get involved according to their functions. If there's function where you need occipital lobe to get involved, if there's function you need frontal lobe to get involved, if there's function you need emotionally get involved. So executive functions are done by cognitive domains also, like planning, problem solving, and decision making are the cognitive domains. So these are the cognitive domains which are neurological pathway. If we understand neurology of our brain, we understand that these cognitive functions are there, and these cognitive domains are there which can be get affected in a person. Okay, so if you see any kind of attention deficit, if a person is have attention deficit, if person is not memorizing something, cannot recall, so there can be cognitive domains which are getting affected due to some neurological basis. Neuropsychology of disorder. First is traumatic brain injury. If there's a injury, like we see in a Phineas Gage experiment, if there's an injury associated with brain, then it will affect human behavior. Okay. Any injury, it can happen any way, like there can be internal injury. There is not possible, there it is not required that every time the skull get like they fractured or something, there could be some invasion should be there, but yeah, there can be some, like if there is a fluid leakage, or if there's some kind of other traumatic injury in brain is happening, then it also affect person's behavior. And the other hand, there are strokes where there's a traffic jam in your brain. Okay, so the neurotransmitter are moving with a speed, everything is functioning well, but if there is a stroke, then it all gets stopped at a place, and it is not traveling between the neurons. Okay, so now there is stroke. The stroke also affect if there's particularly like right hemisphere is getting a stroke, or if the brain stroke is there where everything gets stopped, or some fluid gets stored in brain, so that is also affect the person's behavior. Neurodegenerative disease. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are kind of disease where a person get with age or with poor functioning of brain, there the neurotransmitter signals, the neurological pathway get degenerated. Okay, so now the neurological network we have studied is not functioning optimally. the way it used to act before. Okay, there is some kind of degeneration happen in that neurological functions. So this is how disease like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's develop. Also, if the child is in like in prenatal stage, if the child have any kind of complexity and any kind of abnormalities are there, if the mother is consuming some unhealthy stuff or some addictive stuff, then it can affect the anatomy of neuroanatomy of the baby. Okay, so the fetus get affected by whatever placenta is doing with it. Or so now if the brain doesn't develop, so now understand if there is like the roadmap of the, if you are planning to do something, if there is a roadmap of, if there is a planning of, if there is a what we say is, if there's a biochart of something and it get ruptured, or it get like there's a flaws in your plan. Okay, if you are planning to build something and your plan, the map of your plan is like failing. Okay, if there's some kind of restrictions are there, if there's some kind of mishappenings are there which can happen in this, so if your plan is not good, you are not going to execute it well. Okay, and if it get executed, still it is not going to perform well. So similarly, if the plan, if the prenatal state of a person get degenerated, then when the execution is the birth of that child. So at the time of birth, that child is already having abnormality in brain, and because of that the behavior of that child is different. Like in autism, a person is like self-centered and like in self-belief and is self-amused. Okay, and throwing some tantrums. There's language comprehension, language delayed development as shown in autism. A lot of time there is probability of delayed development of speech disorders and are there in autism. This is because of what? Because at prenatal stage the development of brain couldn't happen well. That is why the child is now having autism. Similarly for ADHD, where the person develop attention deficit hyperactive disorder, which where he cannot focus on something for long, or where he cannot just actively and just try to grab the attention, he just get hyperactive and do stuff like this. Okay, so now as I promised, like neurotransmitter of brain responses we are going to study. There is dopamine. Everyone know it as a happy hormones. It is reward whenever you are doing something good, you get in your brain. Okay, if there's movie, if there's something. Okay, so remember your first relationship, remember your first movie night, remember anything you did for first time when you cycle on your own. So everything releases a dopamine. You don't get excited right now. Okay, but you were very happy and you were very excited at the first, but now it is like not. Why? Because the release of dopamine is less. Okay, earlier it was a great dopamine release was there. Now there is low dopamine release. That is why when we involve in sports and that is why people watch live sports. Why? Because there's possibility of getting dopamine in it. Okay, so that is why they don't get bored while watching a live sport. But what if there's a in any live event or any live sport, if there's a same kind of pattern is repeating? If we are watching a sport where just one run, like if we are watching cricket and there's just one ball one run for 15 hours, so we'll get like it's happening again and again. There's no shot, there's no sixes, there's no run out, there's no great bowling is there. So we'll get obviously we'll get bored by it. Why? Because dopamine release is not happening. If the dopamine release, we get reward, we get good positive and happy hormones. Similarly, there is serotonin which regulate our moods. Okay, wherever the kind of serotonin release is there, the kind of mood the person is having. Similarly, relaxation is done by GABA. GABA is the hormone which provide like relaxation from anxiety or stuff. So there also you can understand these and you can understand like what the medication have in that. The salt of medication the prescriptions we provide to a person is what the person is having GABA relaxin, and it trigger the perfect neurotransmitter for that person, which help that person to perform that task well. Again, for similarly for learning, if we're talking about learning, glutamate is the neurotransmitter which is responsible for our learning experience. Similarly, for memory and muscle, there is acetylcholine. Okay, so now let's to conclude it, understand neuropsychology as an evolving field. It is evolving day by day. With every possible new experiment, they are experiment with neurotransmitter, they are experimenting with the technology, they are experiment with the prescriptions, they are experiment with the medication, everything they are is prescription, everything they are experimenting in day-to-day life. Okay, so this is how we can it is a first thing to conclude this, it is a evolving field. Second thing, we can provide personalized medication. Why? Because now we understood, we have a first assessment, a good assessment process. Now we have understood the functioning of brain, now we have understood the relation between behavior and brain. So now we can provide a medication which is going to definitely, in some sense, in like most of the cases, is going to definitely work on that person. So personalized medicine is also a help which is provided to us because of neuropsychology. Neuroplasticity and healing. We understood neuroplasticity. If you think in a certain manner, your neurotransmitter will build a path. Okay, the way you think. Similarly, CBT help. Okay, so we have talked about CBT and REBT. The therapy sessions help in same manner. We provide another point of view that to that person, which due to neuroplasticity develop a neural pathway which help that person to think in a manner and grow in a manner. And another thing is brain and computer interface. Now we are connecting the cognitive functions to artificial intelligence, the neuroimaging. By neuroimaging, we are understanding how the brain is functioning, and similarly, we are developing artificial intelligence at the core. So this is all from my side for the D4. We have understood neuropsychology as an introduction, a foundation, and we can say in a little depth also. So that's all from my side. Let's see you in next video.